Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Make Your Customers and Employees Happy with Small Moments of Delight. A lot of people are here today because we are responsible for creating digital experiences. We strive towards the ultimate goal of satisfied users, and we do that in a lot of ways to make sure the experiences we craft are frictionless, seamless, and enjoyable. Which, really, when it comes down to it, is about designing the moments of an experience. Designing these moments of delight. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hello, I'm Bradley Smith. I'm a senior interaction designer here at Habanero. My role is not only designing the look and the feel of a solution, but how people are going to interact with the solution. And these small moments I mentioned are a great way of thinking about the experiences we create. Getting these details right, making them enjoyable or delightful, that's what makes a truly exceptional experience, digital or otherwise. And that's great because that's exactly what our webinar is about today. But before we dive in, here's a little bit about who we are here at Habanero and what we do. We're based in Vancouver, Calgary, and Toronto, and our purpose really is to help people and organizations thrive. And one of the ways we do that is through designing frictionless experiences that benefit from the sorts of small moments of delight we'll be discussing today. And this is woven throughout our three core offerings: employee portals and intranets, customer portals and websites, and member portals and extranets. We believe that a great user experience is what makes these all successful. So with the quick background out of the way, what are we going to be discussing today? So first, we're going to look at what a moment of delight really is and how it contributes to a greater user experience. Then we'll take a look at microinteractions and how they enable the creation of these moments of delight, including reviewing some examples you all encounter on an everyday basis. And finally, we'll dive into the details of what truly makes a good microinteraction. And just so everyone's clear, what we're really wanting to explore today is how these small moments of an experience can truly transform a website or intranet from just good to great or fantastic. So let's talk about moments. Moments are everywhere. They are those little parts of a digital experience that create happy users. We often don't even think about them. They are invisible to us until something goes wrong. They don't get credit when you love something, when something just feels right. Small moments of delight can make or break the experience. It's every time Twitter refreshes on the way to work. It's an e-transfer at your bank. It's selecting your dates for an online vacation. The way these small tasks are executed affects how we feel about the experience, sometimes even on a subconscious level. They can reinforce your brand. They can convey emotion. They can convey urgency and key information. They reassure and reinforce. Done well, they are powerful multipliers for the experience. Done poorly, they are reductive to that same overall experience. And this is incredibly important because we need to remember that our designs are rarely experienced as a whole. They're consumed in parts depending on the size of the viewer's device, where they're at on a page, what they're actually focusing on that page, or even the page or subpage of a site they land on. So only through the exploration of these disparate yet connected moments can we really reveal the overall context of a design. So thinking about our designs from the ground up as a collection of moments helps us stay aware of how our websites and intranets are truly experienced on a broader scale. This quote from Charles Eames I think sums it up nicely. The details are not the details, they are the design. And so small moments of delight are what make the difference between a good website and a great one. You've probably encountered this feeling before with websites, with appliances, with anything you interact with in the real world. Sometimes the difference between one or the other is hard to maybe put your finger on, but you just know that one is great and one is just okay. And those are the micro interactions. Those are those small moments of delight that really transform that experience from good to great. So we've covered how important these moments of delight are to an experience, but what does this mean on a more practical level? how can we apply the more abstract concept of moments to our designs? And for that, we turn to what we call microinteractions. So for me, microinteractions are all these little bits of functionality that are around the main features. Or as you see here, microinteractions are contained moments that revolve around a single use case or task. They're things that we don't even think about very often. They're all these little bits that make up the entirety of the user experience. And I like to think of them as being the feel part of look and feel. So these are good for, say, accomplishing a single task, maybe adjusting a setting, maybe interacting with a single piece of information, toggling or turning things on and off. And the list goes on. There are a lot of things that are microinteractions. But let's step into the details really quickly here and take a look at what a microinteraction is really made up of. And so it's made up of 4 parts. The first is a trigger that initiates a microinteraction. This could be a click on a button or on some interface element on the screen. It could be more of an implicit interaction, such as a hover state, or it could be something that the system drives, such as a push notification, an alert message, or some other statement that's triggered elsewhere. And then there's the rules. Rules determine what happens. So they define what can and cannot be done with the microinteraction. They're the rules of the game, if you will. It determines what order things happen in and what occurs when that message arrives or when that button is pressed. And feedback that the rules generate, this is what helps people know what's happening. This is an animation or a change in state or some other change on the screen that can reinforce and provide feedback for what's going on. And finally, loops and modes. Loops and modes determine the meta rules of the microinteraction. So how long does it go on for? Does the microinteraction end immediately or does it repeat forever? So there are ways you can use this to extend your loops into the future, asking users what would happen if they return another time or for the 10th time or the 1000th time with your microinteraction. And how does it change and adapt to how it's being used? So it might adapt over time, over all these repeated visits. So there's a lot that can go into this, and this is all very technical sounding, but a microinteraction is actually fairly straightforward. You encounter them every day, and here are a few common examples that you might have run into today even. The first one is autocorrect. Here you're looking at a simple autocorrect in a text box where you're typing, and this is your trigger here is your actual typing of this, and the system is triggering something with a drop down or an autocorrect of text as you type it in. And this is something that's very subtle but provides a lot of value, and this is what affects the overall impression of a system, this little bit of help that the autocorrect interface can provide. It could be liking a post on Facebook, which is an incredibly simple microinteraction. Simply the toggling of a setting with a like and unlike button and how it displays the feedback underneath telling you that you've liked that item. It could be the rubber band effect. We're all familiar with this. This is on a mobile device now, and even now on desktop devices, where when you get to the bottom of a scrollable area, the content sort of rubber bands back, indicating that you've kind of reached that elastic end of the content. And it's a subtle thing that reinforces and communicates and does so in an unobtrusive manner that really makes the experience seamless and frictionless. It could be pull to refresh, which is a interaction model that didn't exist before mobile phones. And I believe it first started with Twitter, where when you got to the top of the timeline, the natural thing is to take advantage of that rubber band effect, pull down, and have the content automatically refresh when you've reached a particular threshold. It could be autocomplete, where when you type in a search field or another field where it pulls in relevant information and allows you to quickly complete your task or discover what sort of content is present in there. So again, this is something that reinforces and provides great feedback for the user as they're interacting, and it really transforms the experience. So those are just a couple common examples of interactions we encounter on a daily basis, and there are many, many more than that. But what makes a good micro-interaction? How do we think of them? How do we craft moments that can push the experience from good to great? So here's a few key principles that you must consider when creating your own micro-interactions. So the first one is simple. Keep it direct. Make sure it's straightforward, simple, easy to interact with. And there are a lot of ways and a lot of things we can consider to accomplish this principle of keeping it direct. The first is to pay attention to discoverability. So make sure it's easy to discover what this interaction is. So this could be something as simple as a yellow highlight, a tooltip on hover, other highlights of content. An example of potentially bad micro-interaction would be drag and drop. It's a great interaction model, but occasionally it's overused and it's not easily discoverable that you can drag components around on the screen. So sometimes just selection and action upon those selections is good enough. So again, pay attention to discoverability and ask yourself, is this interaction straightforward enough that people can discover it? And test it in usability testing. Create clear calls to action. So this is making your primary actions big, make sure they're clear, that they're clickable, having that they all have some sort of visual affordance with them. So this could be, save and cancel buttons in a web application. It could be a link to view more of a news story. It could be any sort of primary action that you want on your page. Make sure that they're clear, called out, easy to acquire visually, and easy to interact with. Going along with the previous one is reduce physical effort. Some of you may be familiar with Fitts' law, but those of you that aren't, making interactions that are too subtle or small make it harder for the user and takes a longer amount of time for them to acquire that target mentally and physically to be able to click on it and interact with it. So those that are our key interactions that we want to do, make sure that you reduce the physical effort needed to interact with them. So here's an example of the practice knowledge test for ICBC. And this is where you can take the driving knowledge test online on your phone. And you can see here as we interact with it that each of the question item answers are large touch areas that people can easily tap on. The highlights are clear, the actions are clear, and when you're ready to continue, rather than a small continue button, we take up the full width of the screen with a continue button that slides in and makes it clear what your primary action is and what your next step is. And so that sort of pairs nicely with all those examples that we just looked at of things that you need to consider in terms of keeping it direct. You also want to ensure that there are consistent interactions here, so that any sort of activation and deactivation allows people to turn things on and off. Make sure you're doing it in a consistent manner, so that people aren't confused about how they might go back and repeat that action in the future. The second principle is to make it easier to get things done. So what can we do really to simplify the process? Maybe move to fewer steps. An example here would be, liking a post on Facebook. We looked at that example already. It's just a simple toggle, like, unlike, like, unlike. It could be maybe not require an explicit interaction from someone, but it could be just simplifying the data that's displayed on the screen. Here we're looking at the BC Ferries example with how we've taken the check-in times and when to arrive at the terminal and displayed it visually rather than people having to scan through tons of text content to really gather the meaning that they're looking for. You should also be mindful of click weight, the number of interaction steps, the decisions times, the seek time, second guessing, wait time, all that can add up to a measure of how hard it is to accomplish something. So again, if it takes you 8 clicks and you have to look in 10 different places to accomplish a process, it's going to feel like a very heavy interaction, very lengthy. So be mindful of creating micro interactions that have too much click weight to them. The lighter they are from an interaction standpoint, the more seamless and frictionless they're going to feel. And that's going to change the overall experience for the user. So an example of this is the BC Ferries vehicle reservation process. And so here the process has really been simplified into 4 main steps. You can see them across the top: trip details, review itinerary, pay, and then a confirmation step. But here within the page itself, rather than splitting departure terminal selection and arrival terminal selection across multiple screens or using drop-downs, we allow people to just click on the specific terminals right away. And so in 2 clicks, you've selected your departure terminal and your arrival terminal. So the click weight of this process is much lower than it was previously, and than it is in a lot of web applications and other interactions. And to pair along with that is just don't add unnecessary steps. If it's an optional piece, if it's unimportant to the overall flow or the overall task you're trying to accomplish, strip it out. Don't put anything unnecessary in that, because it's only going to serve to potentially frustrate the user as they're working through. And also, preserve readability. Hide secondary actions until they're needed. If there's additional information that can be displayed, ask yourself, is it important enough to display now, or can it be displayed on an implicit action by the user, a click or a hover? And this will allow you to preserve readability and streamline the content of the screen. Another thing to consider here on this principle is change blindness. Our brain expects continuous change. So single page changes sometimes leave things unnoticed because the change is too drastic. How many times have you refreshed a web page or clicked on a web page and the whole screen refreshed and you couldn't figure out what changed on the screen because the whole screen refreshed? So when the whole screen refreshes, we've got an issue. So microinteractions actually allow us to just change the content that's relevant, change the content that needs to be changed at this point. And that pairs a lot with this final item under this one, is moments in context. Bring those detailed views in line when people ask for them and keep them hidden otherwise. Present the moments when they're needed. In that sense, they almost serve as being serendipitous. So here's an example from Medium, which is an online publication tool. And here there's a lot of moments as you scroll down the page. As we scroll down here, you'll see that there's a little tooltip calling out the highlight, and a hover state allows you to interact with it and see it in more detail, but it stays out of the way until it's needed. You can click on the comments on the right and see inline comments pull out. So again, they're hidden. Those moments are only provided in context when the user requests them, and otherwise readability is preserved. And all these interaction models, they have a little bit of fun with them, and we'll get into that in a minute here. Here you can see adding a simple highlight to the screen, again interacting with the click and the hover states, but otherwise hiding that functionality until it's relevant. So it's a very simple set of interactions. Another principle, and this is a more fun one, is just delight your users. Look for opportunities to well, make it fun. We interact with computers on a daily basis, and sometimes it can be very monotonous. And if you can make a moment or a micro-interaction a little bit fun, it can really change the user's overall perspective of that interface. It can take it from being just a good to a great experience. It can take it from just being something that's solid that they forget about to something that's memorable to them. And you can do that by surprising your users. Give them something, that small moment of delight that they don't expect or that goes above and beyond. A simple example of this, for a very common task you might see performed, is on a website trying to grab somebody's logo. This is the Habanero website. If you were to right-click on a logo on a normal website, you would get the system image drop-down that allows you to save as and things like that. But the format of the image is not necessarily correct, etc. So here what we've done is when you right-click, you get a menu like this. And it says, looking for our logo, and you can pick between whatever format you want. And this has a lot of benefits, both for the end user who can pick what they need, and for us, where we can make sure that the logos that get out there are the logos that we want to be used and used in the correct way. And so this is just one of those small moments of delight for someone that goes, oh man, I was just trying to grab the logo and I could get exactly what I wanted, and I can get it in vector format. What other website does that? And so these small moments of delight can really transform an experience. The final principle is invite interactions. What can we do to really encourage people to come and interact with our solutions and to interact with these micro-interactions? So the first thing to consider there is, well, what about blank slate designs? What do these things look like when there's no content? What do things look like when there needs to be a prompt to change the defaults? Don't just use an empty page. What can we do to drive users to interact with these things? A simple example here is the School Link application, where when you first open it, it lets you know that your newsfeed is empty and points at the menu button. And you can go over and it highlights that adding a school is the most important thing, the thing that you need to do to get started. So you can go over there and add a school and get started with the interface. You can use visual affordances to help trigger interactions. So revealing a portion of an image or a feature, but not the whole thing. This can help reveal that there's more content. This can help reveal that something is clickable. We talked a little bit about that earlier in one of the earlier principles. You even saw some example of visual affordance with utilizing the arrows to drive towards kind of a key action on the blank slate designs. Another example here would be on the trip details screen of BC Ferries, where you can select the particular sailing that you're looking for. The select and continue buttons use a lot of affordances here because they're big buttons, they're green, they look clickable, whereas those sailings that are not available are grayed out and have a simple text link. And while you can interact with it and get an explanation, it really drives people using these visual affordances to what their primary action is on this screen. Another thing to think about to drive interactions is to think about prompting moments. Where can you use questions or commands to encourage input and create moments of discoverability? You can think about how maybe Twitter prompts you to share what you're up to, or Facebook invites you to share your status and uses simple language to drive people to interact with these elements on the page. And they really create these moments of discoverability. And show transitions. Transitions is a huge topic and a big trend today in web design, where we're finally utilizing subtle transitions and animations to drive and reinforce our interactions. You can help explain these interactions through these changes in the interface. We should be careful to not overuse them. Animation should be a supporting actor, and it should not take center stage. Always question why you're using animations. But as you move towards engagement, animations may become more useful. These are little moments that communicate, speeding things up, slowing things down, communicating change, communicating location, where have things gone. Just going to show one quick example here of just a simple shopping cart interface where it hangs off the screen, but you can trigger it, it slides on, simple, subtle animation, provides a little bit of transition, provides a little bit of fun, moments of delight here, just simple things that you can do to drive and reinforce. So, our 4 principles again for creating good micro interactions, for creating these moments that are going to stick with people and transform that experience. 1, keep it direct. Keep it simple. 2, make it easier to get things done. Simplify, remove steps. Be mindful of the click weight. 3, delight your users. Find those small moments where you can introduce fun or surprise into your interactions, because that's what's going to make things memorable. And 4, invite interactions. Think of what you can do to encourage people to interact, to prompt them to interact, to reinforce, to use animations to support. What can you do to bring it all together? So these are really 4 key principles of good micro interactions. And in summary, if you can do these small moments of delight, these small micro interactions, it can really transform an experience of a website or an intranet or an application from good to great or fantastic. It's really these small things that add up to the big things. And you put enough of those together and the experience for your end user is going to be amazing. So thank you so much for joining us for the webinar today. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to get in touch with me. My email address is on the screen. You can also find my contact information and anyone else at Habanero at habaneroconsulting.com. And we hope that today's webinar was kind of whet your appetite and inspired you to think about how micro interactions and small moments of delight can truly transform the experiences you're trying to create for your users and for your customers. Thank you so much, and have a good day.